26.5 hours. That is how long it took for me to finally start liking Doom 2016. And that was all thanks to this imp. To explain why this was the case, let's take a little stroll back to October of 2020. I had opened up Doom Eternal for the first time on the Xbox One via Game Pass. Little did I know, I wasn't just opening up Doom Eternal, I was opening up Pandora's box. You see, I was 14 at the time and I was still a massive nut for video games. As such, I had of course heard of Doom before, mostly in relation to the now and rightly mocked and ridiculed frankly ridiculous claim that no adult with a mind of their own should have ever taken seriously of video games causing violence. And of course how it was a pioneer of the FPS genre and took the world by storm, was installed on more computers than the Windows 95 and yada yada yada. But other than that, I had no real connection to the franchise whatsoever, and I didn't hold it in much regard or in high respects. But I had heard from what I think was a Penguin Zero video that Doom Eternal specifically, having released at this time recently, was in fact good. And I now had the opportunity to play it for basically free, so why not take it? Little did I know, I had just made one of the best decisions of my life. The speed, the challenge, the adrenaline, the testosterone, everything about Doom Eternal just instantly hooked me, get it? And when I say hooked, I do mean hooked. This thing was a drug so addicting, I have played it on every single device that I own. Mostly on Switch because it has the best control scheme for a controller, and I had that version at a time where the Xbox One was being stupid and our PS5 didn't exist yet. My PC time is like a fraction of the total time I have spent in the game, and I still have yet to beat it on Ultra Nightmare. How embarrassing. I was even one of the 2 people who genuinely loved battle mode. It was so unique, and I have had some incredibly adrenaline pumping games on both the side of the demons and as the Slayer. I was a Mancubus main, and the hot dog is my favorite cosmetic. And if you think anything differently, you're wrong. But more than even that was the ability to play full ports of Doom 1 and 2 entirely within Doom Eternal. This was basically the perfect entry point for me. It was so much more than a gimmick. It was my first opportunity to experience Doom on something that wasn't a freaking Sega Genesis Mini, which no longer works for some reason. All of this content was something that I could and did sink my teeth into over and over and over and over again. Doom firmly took a spot among my periodic obsessions, and boy, was I obsessed. Due to that past passion, I now have access to every single Doom game that's still available, so none of the mobile games unfortunately. And it's been that way for quite some time. All this to say, Doom Eternal was a pretty important game to me, and I hold it deeply in my heart for getting me into this incredible series. I didn't play Doom 2016 until this March. Yeah, despite having it for well over 3 years, I had never actually taken the time to get into and play the game because I'd always just default to Eternal, or I'd play something else like Doom Eternal, Ultra Kill, or Orange Roulette. There was basically a period of time where I just moved on to other things for a bit, you know, it happens. Hell, I bought the deluxe edition of Dark Ages and had early access to it, but only started seriously playing it recently, and I'm having a blast doing so. That game clicked with me much faster than 2016 did. When I did finally decide to pick up 2016 and try it out, I need to mention that I definitely had some expectations going into it. 1. This was going to be easy. 2. This was going to be fast. 3. There is no 3. So, were my expectations met? No. Here's what happened. I started my first ever run of the game on Nightmare difficulty. Why? Because I enjoy playing games on the hardest difficulty. I think it forces me to push all the game systems to their limit and represents the game at its most engaging. Also, at this point, I could play Doom Eternal on Nightmare difficulty pretty comfortably, at least on the Switch. And I figured that if I could do that, then this would be a walk in the park in comparison. It was not a walk in the park. I was absolutely blindsided by just how difficult this game really is. I think people really overstate how easy Doom 2016 is in comparison to the other games. You are going to have your ass handed to you on a brimstone platter if you aren't familiar with the quirks present in 2016, and unfamiliar with the quirks I was. For 1, glory kills. Don't do anything. What's 5 health going to do? Also, that health is much more finicky to pick up after it drops because it doesn't automatically get sucked into you. If you're at low health, you're pretty much better off killing as many demons as you can in that state so they drop health on their own, and then you can go and pick up all the drops. Secondly, enemies deal a metric ton of damage. A single imp fireball will kill you even if you're at like 70 health, and the soldier's charge shot? Do not get me started on the soldier's charge shot. And most importantly, there are far fewer safety nets in 2016 than there is in Eternal and in Dark Ages. The obvious thing to point out here is the fact that platforming is incredibly dangerous in 2016, and falling will lead to an immediate death. But other than that, 2016 doesn't have a grace hit. What I mean by that is that if you're at decently high health in Eternal or Dark Ages and get hit by an extremely high damaging attack, even if it technically should kill you, it won't, and will instead leave you at around 5 health. This is done so that you don't feel completely cheated by getting killed by a single attack that you possibly didn't even see while you're at a health value that should have realistically served to protect you from suffering such an outcome. Basically, it feels better to have a chance to bounce back rather than it does to immediately slam into concrete right after being on cloud 9. The fact that 2016 decides to go for the latter, along with the immense damage and minuscule health they receive from glory kills, means that this game is extremely punishing, especially in the early game. And if you aren't prepared for that, like I wasn't, then chances are you aren't going to be having a good time. And I can unfortunately confirm that by as late as the 6th level, almost halfway through the game, I was frustrated, disappointed, and confused. But I knew this was as much a problem with me as it was a problem with the game. I know of Doom 2016's immensely positive reputation, and I know that it has that reputation for a reason. People love to say that art is subjective, and that is true, but it's to a point. I'll get back to Doom soon, but I'm going to be talking about overall general media critique for a second. The way I see it, there are things about media that are subjective and things that are objective. For something to be objective to me, there are two things that I take into account. The first is the effect that something within that media would have to your average audience. If there are more things in it that would have a positive effect or influence on a person, then I'd say that media is more good than bad, and vice versa. Secondarily, I take into account whether that aspect of the media has done what it set out to do, or in other words, completes the objective of the media. Subjectivity, on the other hand, is a much more personal, individual feeling towards that thing, as one would imagine. Take Godzilla PS4 for example, a game that I would consider to be objectively bad as a game, and yet I love it to death because of how it's a near perfect classic Godzilla simulator. The biggest detriment to the game being the movement and control of the monsters and how they're quite slow and in some cases, Mechagodzilla clunky, is something that I would personally prescribe to be one of its biggest strengths because of the way it perfectly captures that powerful lumber that the monsters had in the classic movies, specifically in the Heisei era, which is the one I grew up with, which means that it fit into the objective of being a good Godzilla simulator, and that's kind of antithetical to being a good game in and of itself, but that's a video for another time. A feeling like that was something that was also starkly missing from the Pipeworks trilogy of games, and I can only ever find it in Godzilla Generations, so having a modern and faithful rendition of being able to play the movies was something I cherished back then and still equally cherish now, despite the fact that it can turn the game into a bore if you either have no connection to that whole aspect of things, or if you're just not in the mood for that kind of experience. Now, applying this to Doom, let's take a look at the game systems and start describing my personal experience with them, starting with the guns first. The guns feel good to shoot, they do. They look good while shooting, and their sound design is pretty punchy and satisfying all throughout the arsenal, especially with the heavy cannon. But something about how they interacted with the enemies for me felt off. It felt like they didn't do enough damage, especially the shotgun, and the feedback from the enemies was much less effective in conveying the damage I was doing compared to how Doom Eternal went about it. Couple that with the movement being so much slower than it was in Eternal and the movement options being so much more scarce, and you've got the fact that I had much less to combat rapidly advancing enemies than I did in Doom Eternal. Glory killing left me as a sitting duck because I had no dash to immediately reposition from any incoming projectiles. The lack of a dash also meant that the demons had a much easier time predicting my movements than in Eternal, so I couldn't make split-second reactions like in Eternal, which led to damage and deaths that I could see, but I just didn't have the capabilities to get away from. I felt like I couldn't be anywhere near as aggressive as I can be in Eternal because the enemies did so much damage and there were no safety nets, so the game just felt like it was complete BS sometimes, and throwing myself at an encounter over and over again seemed to come down to luck as to whether I won it, because sometimes the enemies would do something and sometimes they wouldn't, and I just didn't have as much control over the fight in the arena as I do in Eternal. Do you see the problem here? So fellas, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Doom 2016 is in fact not Doom Eternal. I knew this. I went into the game telling myself that. Yet I played the game like Eternal regardless. That is, until I had my encounter with this imp, Bordenhathul, and he graced me with the swipe of enlightenment. Now, the astute among you may realize that this is the first level of the game, and it is, in fact, the first level of the game. But it is also during my second playthrough of the game on Nightmare difficulty, hence why this event took place 26.5 hours after I first started up the game. But that begs the question, why now? What made Bordenhathul so different from the dozens of other imps that killed me like Gorantek, Phobosian, and Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno Crispin Crispiniana Maria Remedios de la Santísima Trinidad Reyes Picasso? Well, that's simple. Bordenhathul killed me in such a way that was entirely foreseeable, entirely avoidable, and entirely, obviously, undoubtedly, my fault. I advanced on him, and he punished me with a melee swipe. And that's when I realized what was going wrong. I never once treated a single enemy in this game with the respect that they deserve. You see, in Doom Eternal, you are given the luxury to get all up in an enemy's personal space and then just get out super quickly when they get all uppity about it. You can frickin' barrel stuff a Baron and then just be on the other side of the map in a matter of mere seconds. In Doom 2016, you don't have such an ability. If you get close to an enemy, you better be intending for that enemy to be dead upon your next trigger pull or pacified at the very least. If neither of those conditions are met, you will be facing the consequences of not properly social distancing. Not just that though, since you can't get out of the way of projectiles on a moment's notice in this game, you have to keep tabs on everything that's shooting at you and pay much more attention to how you're moving and positioning yourself in relation to them. Are you far enough away so that you can see them coming and dodge in time? Will dodging bring you into another projectile? What enemies should you get out of the way first to lower the amount of projectiles coming at you? See, I had no control over the fights and the arena because I was playing 2016 through the lens of having to manage myself, my ammo, my health, my armor, resources, etc., but that's just not the case. Ammo is pretty much already figured out for you, and trying to manage health and armor doesn't mean much if 3 attacks will end up killing you anyways. Eternal has you focusing on yourself, and in keeping yourself topped up, your enemies will fall naturally as they are your primary source of resources, and I feel that applies to pretty much every enemy in the game that isn't a super heavy, in which case all your attention pretty much has to go to them. Doom 2016 has you managing your enemies, and doing that effectively is what will keep you topped up since they passively drop ammo already, and if you kill them before they have a chance to kill you, then you don't even have to worry about your health and armor. I mean, you still do since you likely aren't going to be playing perfectly, but that's not your main goal in this game. While Doom Eternal has a loop that I would say is frantic, 2016 has one that I would call methodical. And again, this all relates to the higher difficulties like Nightmare. I highly doubt this would all hold the same weight if I was on a lower one. The tools you're given in 2016 corroborate this philosophy in my opinion. The chainsaw being able to remove high value demons, the stun bomb from the plasma rifle, which I didn't use until the end of my first playthrough, so put that in for another point on the self-sabotage scale, and runes like the Rich Get Richer and ammo boost. And all of this gathered from a single imp, giving me a death that I could have avoided if I just followed that gameplay philosophy. So that being said, how does that look in practice? Not a single death. Except for this one time where I accidentally slipped into the Doom Eternal mindset for half an hour second. And this other time with physics check, but we don't have to talk about that. Now, though this change in how I approached the game was the most important thing that led me to understand and enjoy it to its fullest, it was spontaneous, a little out of my control, and very unlikely to happen. It was a conclusion I didn't expect to come to, and I never expected my view of the game to change so rapidly and so completely. So, what did I do before this to try to make my experience better? Well, during my first playthrough, it was after that level where I figured my biggest problem with the game was a combination of a skill issue and an optimization. By unoptimization, I mean that the way I was playing the game and the settings I had for it were not optimal for my enjoyment of the game. This meant going into the settings, fixing the FOV, oh my god, that instantly fixed the issue of feeling super slow, oh yeah! And for the first time ever, it got me to actually set keybinds for my different weapons. This was the first time I've ever done this for any game, and it only happened because of me playing on Nightmare and doing it out of necessity and the fact that my scroll reel is super screwy. This was, without a doubt, the most important change I made to how I play not just Doom, but shooters on the PC in general. Seriously, if you play boomer shooters and have not started setting keybinds for things, do so. It will make your gameplay so much better once you get used to it. I owe 2016 for forcing me to do this and making me so much better at all of these games than I would have been otherwise. Of course, even with these changes, despite the fact they made me undoubtedly better at the game, it was still Bordenhathul after my first run who made me truly appreciate the game for what it was, as opposed to what I was thinking it'd be. If that's the case, why would I mention a failed attempt to get me to like the game? That is because it's important for you to realize I don't like video games. I love them. And if I don't love a video game, I try my best to find out why and see if it's something I can overcome. To me, almost all forms of media deserve some respect if you're choosing to engage with it on a genuine level. And if I'm going to try to talk about anything in any way, you bet I'm going to try to understand it inside and out before I place myself in a position like that. Honestly, I feel like that should be the baseline for making a review and important for driving any kind of discussion around something. This is why I 100% of the campaign. It's why I played on Nightmare difficulty. It's why I started a new playthrough. It's why I spent 26.5 hours on the game before I ended up liking it. So that I wouldn't come out with a baffling take like Doom 2016 is overrated and doesn't deserve all the praise. Now, I don't think that Doom 2016 is a perfect game, but it definitely deserves all the praise it's gotten, and if I came along and said otherwise just because I wasn't engaging with it properly, I would be doing a disservice to the gaming community, to the Doom community, and most importantly to myself, because I would have missed just how awesome this game truly is. So as you can probably tell, this video is not a review of Doom 2016. Those already exist in spades. The game is good. You know the game is good. I knew the game was good before playing it. I had nothing to offer on that front until it gave me the experience that I spent the last 15 minutes describing. So that being said, what's the point of this video? That would be to get you thinking about how we engage in media and in media discourse. Have you ever played an immensely popular and well-liked game just to end up not really having the same feeling towards it as everyone else? I know there's a crowd that believes Ultrakill to be overrated, and if you're a part of that crowd, I'd like to ask why. I'd love to be a Bordenhuthel for somebody and get them to enjoy a game that I would consider to be one of the greatest of all time. Have you ever watched a movie that everybody seems to love but you just couldn't feel the same towards? Feel free to describe that experience. I know the Doom community in itself is split on which Doom game in the reboot trilogy is better, and if you ask me personally, I'd say Doom Eternal because I find its frantic, fast and furious style of gameplay more appealing. Also, its reward structure is far better than Doom 2016's and Dark Ages. It gives me a reason to keep coming back, you know? All in all though, I find fighting over which game is better, though it can be fun, is kind of useless since all of them are very much incomparable experiences on everything besides a few quality of life mechanics. 2016 has a multiplayer I haven't experienced, and the Snap Map, which I've heard some crazy things about, and the Dark Ages has the longest campaign and the Repertorium, which I also haven't done anything with yet. I've only recently finished Dark Ages and had to make this video. I'm getting there. At its core, this video is about understanding a piece of entertainment. Any piece of entertainment. I think I finally now know what people mean by gatekeeping is good sometimes, though I personally disagree with that statement and would rather never have it happen. I get the sentiment. Sometimes people try to talk about something like they know it, despite the fact they might not have the right amount of context or knowledge to properly speak about and engage with it, and by extension the community around it. I saw this happen with the Godzilla community when -1 released, and it's kind of happening now with people thinking that Space Godzilla is too goofy to be in the Monsterverse, and yeah. I believe nowadays we call this LARPing, but I don't want to add to the vitriol going towards these people who might not fully understand something. This kind of discourse is a result of how the internet works. You'll find it everywhere. I have, do, and will always hate the phrase of X community is toxic or terrible because the internet is not an accurate reflection of how people act. It is exaggerated to the nth degree in almost every case. Instead, I want to give context on how these people may think because understanding a piece of entertainment can be incredibly difficult even if it seems simple. If I wasn't as passionate about video games as an art form as I am, I wouldn't have spent over a full day's worth of time on an experience I wasn't enjoying in order to learn how to enjoy it. And it would be absolutely ludicrous of me to expect anyone else to do the same. If someone engages with something that I would call good and they don't connect with it in the same way I do, either because they currently aren't enjoying it or they simply don't care enough about it, that's when I consider that something simply isn't for them. And yeah, I can be disappointed about it and consider it tragic, but at the end of the day, they don't feel like spending the time to enjoy that piece of media properly would be worth it. And seeing as how time is the most valuable thing we have, that's perfectly understandable. A problem arises if they take that initial experience towards something that they didn't understand that they had and attempt to apply it to all aspects of that media, and then try putting themselves into any kind of position of authority over the subject by proclaiming how X is good or X is bad or X is overrated or X is underrated in any kind of serious manner. If I did, this video would literally be called Doom 2016, the most overrated game of the last decade. That's when you start making people who have dedicated a significant amount of time to something angry, and rightfully so, because people care about art and want it to be represented accurately and respectfully. And that's not something that I think should be a source of shame or a reason to look down on someone. Can it be taken too far? Yes, of course, and any action taken to intentionally harm anyone in any way over entertainment should be a source of shame and a very good reason to look down on someone. And if the internet had the tools to do so, I'm sure that every time that happened, those people and persons who perpetrated such actions would be properly excised from whatever community those individuals claim to be a part of. But if you misrepresent something, anything, and are considered a figure of authority by many people, don't be surprised if you have impassioned fans of of that thing correcting you, cordially or not, in bigger numbers than you may expect. If you absolutely have to do so, I would recommend clarifying that you're not too knowledgeable on a certain subject before you try saying something, just to put yourself in a position where people would want to correct you on something rather than feel the need to correct you. And on that note, if you haven't spent a lot of time on the subject and would like to know more about it in a relatively quick time frame, I'm sure that any fan of that thing would absolutely love to dump all that time they spent on the subject on you within the span of 10 minutes. Forewarning for this method though, for there is always a chance that this info dump will be so dense that it causes some form of time dilation, which ends up making it feel like 10 hours. For example, did you know that the story of Doom 2016 that everybody loves to say is non-existent is actually incredibly interesting and deals with themes of corporate greed and exploitation in a way that's super unique and comes from a source you wouldn't expect in a setting involving a massive corporate facility with a monopoly on an infinite source of energy? Well, he's gonna be going on for a while. I may save his ramblings for a video at another time, but right now, that's all I have to say. Apologies for getting a bit rambly near the end. I really care about entertainment and how people share it among each other, but it is an extremely difficult and complicated subject to put into words for me. I just want everyone to have a good time sharing and engaging with what they love, and if you watch this far, chances are you feel that way too. If that's the case, it would be great to have you stick around by pressing that subscribe button to see more needlessly pretentious content from me, leaving a like on the video so more like-minded people can see it, hyping if you wanna, and commenting whatever you want. Info dump about your favorite subject, like a webcomic you enjoy or a computer program you found to be neat. But the thing that would make me the happiest for you to do is to have a good day, and in celebration of Doom 2016's late 10th anniversary, be entertaining.